Alright, so once again, we're going to have more than one video because I paused it and then stopped it. And I can't even remember where we were because I shut the book. So, let's see. I'm going to pause it. Alright, I think I've started it up again. So here's Ray. Good stories came to him and interesting. I'm on page 104. Good stories came to him and interesting recollections. Taya had a great respect for the reports he had to write out and for the telegrams that he had handed to him at stations, for all the knowledge and experience it must take to run a freight train. So he may not have the insight into her artistry, but he does. He's knowledgeable. He's got. Here's his gift to Taya, is these adventures. Down at the bottom of page 104, Giddy is saying, if you want to see a clean icebox, look at this one. Yes, Kennedy always carries fresh cream to eat on his oatmeal. I'm not particular. The tin cow is good enough for me. I had to figure that one out. That's condensed milk. And then if we look at the top of page 105, there's a description of Mrs. Kronberg's dress. She wore a tan bombazine dress, made very plainly, and carried a roomy, worn mother of the family handbag. I'm guessing that a mother of the family handbag is, a giant purse, is what I'm thinking. But I have a picture also of the kind of dress she's likely wearing. Bombazine is silk, and it could be also cotton. And would be this would be something like what she was wearing. And maybe this is a little bit less plain. It's probably a little less plain than Mrs. Kronberg's, but it's that approximate shape. Mrs. Kronberg was a fine-looking woman. She was short and square, but her head was a real head, not a mere jerky termination of the body. That's hilarious. But again, a contrast to the poor Dr. Archie and his scary wife. At the top on page 106, wind and sand are pretty high-class architects. Isn't that an interesting description? That's the principle of most of the cliff dweller remains down at the Canyon de Shelley. I think I have something about that. That's a real canyon. Oh yeah, wait. One of the most spectacular cliff-dwelling remains in the American Southwest. In northeastern Arizona, the site was inhabited by Anasazi from 1000 BC to AD 1600, followed by the Navajo, who were forced out by the U.S. government in 1863. And death comes for the Archbishop, which was another book by Cather, published in 1927. Cather touches on the topic of the brutal Navajo relocation led by the Indian scout Kit Carson. There's more down below about the cliff dwellers. They were clever at most everything but metals. That one failure kept them from getting across. It was the quicksand that swallowed them up as a race. I guess civilization proper began when men mastered metals. It's interesting. At the top of this page, Ray was not vain about his bookish phrases. He did not use them to show off, but because they seemed to him more adequate than colloquial speech. So it's as if he too is a striving artist. He's particular about his choice of words. The pages of the book that were like a battlefield. The laboring author had fallen back from metaphor after metaphor, abandoning position after position. And then in the middle of this page, 107, Taya didn't mind Ray's, I hope I'm recording, Ray's travel lecture expressions. She dodged them unconsciously as she did her father's professional palaver. The light in Ray's pale blue eyes and the feeling in his voice more than made up for the stiffness of his language. So She likes to hear his tales, and of course he's well traveled because he is a railroad man. And then if we look at the top of page 108, what I like about those old Aborigines is that they got all their ideas from nature. Those he's talking about the Indians, the cliff dwellers. If you look over then on page 109, at the end of that incomplete paragraph at the top, there's something mighty elevating about those old habitations. You feel like it's up to you to do your best on account of those fellows having it so hard. You feel like you owed them something. He has something of the ability to strive the way Taya does. At the bottom of page 109, you get soil of any color in Colorado, match most any ribbons, so the magnificent of their scenery. Over on the top of page 110, remember that article I read last week about space and place. And place is Moonstone. Space is what's outside of Moonstone. And here we have that, just right before our very eyes. Beside the station house, there was a blue grass plot protected by a red plank fence and 6 fly-bitten box elder trees not much larger than bushes. So this is place. They were kept alive by frequent hosing from the water plug. But then, a few lines later, behind the station there was a water course which roared in flood time, and a basin in the soft white rock where a pool of alkali water flashed in the sun like a mirror. That's space. So place is the interior of the town, and space is what is beyond. Um, there, she's walking along and she finds 2 hobos, 2 tramps. They are the travelers on the rail. Over on page 111, she says she was not afraid of tramps. She doesn't say this. This is what the narrator says. She always talked to them and never turned one away. This is Mrs. Kronberg. She hated to think how many of them there were crawling along the tracks over the vast country. Um, Again, giving us a bit of insight into Mrs. Kronberg and her generosity. At the bottom of this page, you fellows grumble too much, Mrs. Kronberg, as she corked the pickle jar. Your job has its drawbacks, but it don't tie you down. Of course, there's the risk, but I believe a man's watched over and he can't be hurt on the railroad or anywhere else. If it's intended, he shouldn't be. There's that bit of fatalism again. Whatever be will be. Next paragraph. Ray smoked his pipe in silence, watching Thea and her mother clear away the lunch. He was thinking of that Mrs. Kronberg had in her face the same serious look that Thea had, only hers was calm and satisfied. Thea was intense and questioning, but in both it was a large kind of look that was not all the time being broken up and convulsed by trivial things. I guess maybe that's a reference maybe to the way Tilly thinks. They both carried their heads like Indian women, with a kind of noble unconsciousness. He got so tired of women who were always nodding and jerking, apologizing, deprecating, coaxing, insulting with their heads. Their heads. Um, Down at the bottom are just some other references of the beauty of the Colorado area. There were 4 distinct ranges, one behind the other. They were a very pale blue, a color scarcely stronger than wood smoke, and the sunset had left bright streaks in the snow-filled gorges. In the clear yellow-streaked sky, the stars were coming out, flickering like newly lighted lamps, growing steadier and more golden as the sky darkened and the land beneath them fell into complete shadow. You could almost feel the kind of experience that Cather had when she visited her brother, um, and how much this impacted her. It was a cool, restful darkness that was not black or forbidding, but somehow open and free. There is space. It's open and free. Um, he says in the next paragraph, I don't know I don't know as I really ever noticed him much till the first year I herded sheep up in Wyoming. To me, he sounds quite a bit like Gabriel Oak in Far from the Madding Crowd, doesn't he? Um, at the end of the next paragraph, I tried to save them sheep all night long. It comes kind of hard on a boy when he first finds out how little he is and how big everything else is. It just sounds like Gabriel Oak. Um, at the bottom of this page, no occasion for you to see, he said warmly. There'll always be plenty of other people to take the knocks for you. That's nonsense, Taya says impatiently. Everybody's up against it for himself. Success or fails. Himself. That's her philosophy. Down at the bottom of the page of 1 and 13. But when you look at it another way, there are a lot of halfway people in this world who help the winners win and the failures fail. If a man stumbles, there's plenty of people to push him down. But if he's like the youth who bore, I'll tell you about that in a minute, those same people are foreordained to help him along. So they may hate to worse than blazes, and they may do a lot of cussing about it, but they have to help the winners and they can't dodge it. So it's natural law. So some people are the helpers and some people are the achievers. And this concept, the youth who bore, that line is from a poem by Longfellow, um, in which he talks about striving, the Excelsior, always striving for something ever higher. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Then, if we look down at the bottom of this page, the Casey he's the brakeman again. He's Casey's song told all this with much detail, both tender and technical. And after each of the dozen verses comes this refrain. Um, Casey is the character in the song that he's singing. She is fictional, and this is from a collection of oral tales. Um, and this is Casey, who perhaps might be based on a woman in the baseball stands. Women didn't go to baseball games at the time. And certainly it wasn't as highly developed as what we see now. But this is about a woman in the baseball stands, and it seems a bit like Take Me Out to the Ball Game. And that's song. And then as you see at the top of page 115, Giddy and Ray and their hospitable little house in the easygoing country and the stars. She curled up on the seat again with that warm, sleepy feeling of the friendliness of the world, which nobody keeps very long and which she was to lose early and irrevocably. Remember when I was talking about the train? This caboose becomes the train becomes the means by which she goes on to Chicago, but it is also, in this case, a representative of home. It's home to her. Um, so they are on their way to to a prayer meeting. Let's see. The summer flew by. Taya was glad when Ray Kennedy had a Sunday in town and could take her driving. Out among the sand hills, she could forget the new room, which was the scene of wearing and fruitless labor, the piano lessons, wearing and fruitless labor. And so she can leave that place and go out into space. At the end of the next paragraph, paragraphs, um, Taya declared rebelliously, pushing her plate with the angry determination to eat nothing more. She let's see, one night a week is not enough for the pastor's daughter. Oh, they have to go to the prayer meeting, and she is not happy. You won't do anything in the sewing society, and you won't take part in the Christian Endeavor or the Band of Hope. And I wrote in the margin, it sounds horrid. Can you imagine for a 15-year-old girl? She doesn't want to participate in the prayer meetings or the sewing club. It's because she's meant for something bigger. You know, look at the top of page 116. This argument conquered. Taya, though she left the table sullenly, the fear of the tongue, that terror of little tongues, is usually felt more keenly by the minister's family than by other households. We'll hear this, that um, we'll see what people are talking about. They're talking. Nobody wants anybody to talk about them. Next few lines later, Mrs. Kronberg had her own conviction that people talked when they felt like it and said what they chose, no matter how the minister's family conducted themselves. That's her what will be will be. Taya was still under the belief that public opinion could be placated, that if you clucked often enough, the hens would mistake you for one of themselves. I think that's just hilarious. Um, one of my daughters really likes chickens. I'm not even sure why she wanted me to get chickens when I bought this house. No thanks. They're kind of cute, the ones you see at the state fair with the fluffy hair. But anyway, down at the bottom of this page, 116, Mrs. Kronberg never spoke in meeting. She told people firmly that she had been brought up to keep silent and let the men talk, but she gave respectful attention to the others, sitting with her hands folded in her lap. She has this role as the minister's wife. And the prayer meeting audience was always small. The young and energetic members of the congregation came only once or twice a year to keep people from talking. There's that phrase. And then at the end of the paragraph on the top of page 117, Taya accepted the mournfulness of the prayer meeting as a kind of spiritual discipline like funerals. She always read late after she went home and felt a stronger wish than usual to live and to be happy. The meetings were conducted in the Sunday school room, and every back, every face, every head said resignation. Um, and Cather goes on to tell more about the prayer meetings at the bottom of page 117. Um, and then over on the top of page 118, Taya always wanted to ask him more about it, about the mysterious wickedness and about the vision. But then at the end of the next paragraph, um, Cather's just showing us who's at this prayer meeting, including one of the sick girls. Used to ask them to pray that she might have more faith in the times of depression that came to her when all the way before seemed dark. These are one of these sad little creatures who attends the prayer meeting. And then there's an old lady who's got 6 sons on the railroad who uses lots and lots of railroad terminology. Down at the bottom of page 18, the last couple of lines, there are many ways of describing that color of age, but in reality, it is not like parchment or like any of the things it is said to be like. That brownness and that texture of skin are found only in the faces of old human creatures who have worked hard and who have always been poor. Yikes. Hope we don't get that far. Let's see, in the middle of this page, there's a reference to Jules Verne. They hurried into the house and made a dash for the parlor and the hard coal burner behind which Gunnar was sitting on the stool reading his Jules Verne. Jules Verne, of course, is adventure books, and that's the kind of things that Taya's brothers read. At the bottom, at the end of this chapter on page 120, the hymns, the sick girl, the resigned black figures were forgotten. It was the night of the ball in Moscow. She's reading Anna Karenina. Taya would have been astonished if she could have known how years afterward, when she had need of them, those old faces were to come back to her, long after they had hidden away under the earth, that they would seem to her then as full of meaning, is mysteriously marked by destiny, as the people who dance the mazurka under the elegant Korsunsky. This is the point of the chapter, is that Taya will someday recall these people and their steadfastness, even when they are already dead and buried. She will remember them and think about them. So in the next chapter, Um, Again, another reference to the gossipiness of the townspeople and their importance. You must keep up appearances at the top of page 121. Um, During one of these revivals, sister Anna professed her religion, um, and created a kind of attitude of being set apartness. I like that phrase in the middle of the paragraph. So now Anna has taken on the religion. Anna is such a contrast to Taya, because Taya doesn't care to marry, isn't taking the religion, um, has this artistic discovery, whereas Anna is like the second in command for this house of unruly children. Mrs. Kronberg says Anna, she's an American. She's American. The Scandinavian mold of countenance, more or less marked in each of the other children, was scarcely discernible in her, and she looked enough like the other Moonstone girls to be thought pretty. Anna's nature was conventional. And then at the top of on page 122, um, she has no graver fault than priggishness. But her mind was really shocking. It had really shocking habits of classification. The wickedness of Denver and of Chicago, and even of Moonstone, occupied her thoughts so much, too much. Taya, in all Taya's ways and friends, seemed indecorous to Anna. But everyone knew that music was nothing very real, and that it did not matter in a girl's relations with people. This is Anna's point of view. What was real then, and what mattered? Poor Anna. So, over at the top of page 123. Oh, here's just a little bit of insight into Anna as well, because of her view of Taya's friends. She says, on the whole, she wondered what such an exemplary young man in found to like in Taya. That's Ray. And Dr. Archie, she treated respectfully because of his position, but she knew he had kissed the Mexican baritone's pretty daughter. Well, we don't. That's not really Dr. Archie's nature, but Anna's making these assumptions. Then Preacher Kronberg's secret conviction was very much like Anna's. He believed that his wife was absolutely good, but there was not a man or a woman in his congregation whom he trusted all the way. Mrs. Kronberg, on the other hand, was likely to find something to admire in almost any human conduct that was positive and energetic. Isn't she interesting? Let's see, if we go over to the next section of this chapter. Although revivals were merely a part of the year's work, like examination week at school, and although Anna's piety impressed her very little, a time came when Taya was perplexed about religion. Um, and I think many thinking people are sometimes perplexed about religion. A scourge of typhoid broke out in Moonstone, and several of Taya's classmates died of it. Um, I think this is a representation of people people's thoughts when something tragic occurs. Why? Why did that happen? So this tramp comes to town, and he's over on page 125. The law made no provision to grub estate vagrants or provide goods for them. There's nothing in the law. So he was thrown in the calaboose, which is the prison, and he's let out in 24 hours. But he has no provisions. Sometimes I see people leaving the jail and they walk down Port Road there in Port Washington, and many of them have nothing. I think they are given a couple $100. So, but they have nothing on them. When they were picked up, they didn't have anything, and so when they're let out, they don't have anything. Um, let's see. I got top. Let's see. This is in the middle of page 126. Uh, the tramp seems a bit resentful of how he's treated in Moonstone, there's a standpipe it's a tube or it's a pipe that goes up to the water um, tower. The tramp had got even with Moonstone. He had climbed the standpipe by the handholds to let himself down into the 75 feet of cold water with his shoes and hat and roll of ticking. The city councilor had a mild panic and passed a new ordinance about tramps, but the fever had already broken out, and several adults and half a dozen children died of it. So Taylor doesn't really tell us exactly how the tramp got even. And as far as I can figure, he either was so filthy and carried such disease, and so when he perhaps bathed in this water tower, he spread typhoid, or maybe he drowned in the water tower and spread typhoid, or worse, we're not we I couldn't find this to save my life, and I really wanted to know what was it that he did, and he might have spread typhoid the way typhoid usually gets around. Um, he may have gone potty in there. It's terrible. Um, So here's down at the bottom of page 126. Even when she was practicing, the drama of the tramp kept going on in the back of her head, and she was constantly trying to make herself realize what pitch of hatred or despair could drive a man to do such a hideous thing. Um, she kept seeing him in his bedraggled clown suit, the white paint on his roughly shaven face, playing his accordion before the saloon. She had noticed his lean body, his high bald forehead that sloped back like a curved metal lid. How could people fall so far out of fortune? She tried to talk to Ray Kennedy about her perplexity, but Ray would not discuss things of that sort with her. It was his sentimental conception of women that they should be deeply religious, though men were at liberty to doubt and finally to deny. A picture called The Soul Awakened, popular in Moonstone parlors, pretty well interpreted Ray's idea of a woman's spiritual nature. That, that, um, what am I on? 18. I have a note on that one. The Soul Awakened. Two possibilities have been suggested for this picture. John March suggests The Soul Awakening by James Sant, a sentimental image of a radiant-faced young girl pressing a book against her breast and marking a passage with her finger. Engraved versions were widely sold in the Victorian period. Polyduria proposes William Holman Hunt, a suggestive scene of a woman rising from the lap of a man seated at a piano. Her expression is more conflicted than radiant. Radiant. Um, Down in the middle of this page, it seems to me, Dr. Archie, that the whole town's to blame. I'm to blame myself. I know he saw me hold my nose when I went by. Father's to blame. If he believes the Bible, he ought to have gone to the calaboose, the prison, and cleaned that man up and taken care of him. That's what I can't understand. Do people believe the Bible or don't they? If the next life is all that matters, and we're put here to get ready for it, then why do we try to make money or learn things or have a good time? Interesting point. There's not one person in Moonstone that really lives the way the New Testament says. Does it matter or doesn't it? Um, Next paragraph. All religions are good and all are pretty much alike. This is Dr. Archie, but I don't see how we live up to them in the sense you mean. The next page, 128. I think we ought to keep the commandments and help other people all we can, but the main thing is to live by those 20 splendid years, to do all we can and enjoy all we can. He has just told her that, between your youth and your old age is 20 good years. That's a little depressing. I hope we have more than that. But the failures are swept back into the pile and forgotten. They don't leave any lasting scar in the world, and they don't affect the future. The things that last are the good things. The people who forge ahead and do something, they really count. So we know that that's going to be Taya's lot. Next paragraph, down at the bottom. You're going to Chicago someday and do something with that fine white voice of yours. You're going to be a number one musician and make us proud of you. Take Mary Anderson. Mary Anderson, who's that? Popular classical actress who appealed to all social classes. So that's the reference. You're going to be appealing to everyone. We all like people who do things, even if we only see their faces on cigar box. Next page, 129. She loved the familiar trees and the people in those little houses, and she loved the unknown world beyond Denver. She felt as if she were being pulled in two between the desire to go away forever and the desire to stay forever. She had only 20 years, no time to lose. Down at the end of this, um, life rushed in upon her through the window, or so it seemed. In reality, of course, life rushes from within, not from without. This is the narrator talking to us. There is no work of art so big or so beautiful that it was not once all contained in some youthful body, like this one which lay on the floor in the moonlight, pulsing with ardor and anticipation. It was on such nights that Thea Kronberg learned the thing that old Dumas meant when he told the Romantics that to make a drama he needed but one passion and four walls. Of course, Dumas is one of the pioneers of the Romantic theater in France, author of The Count of Monte Cristo. Um, Cather quotes his one passion, four walls credo again in her 1922 essay, the novel, oh, the novel in a French word. So I'm going to stop here because I think I've gone over. I'm not actually sure since I stopped the tape, and I hope I didn't record you. I hope you didn't hear me recording, um, having to wash the carpet. It's terrible. So the next chapter is uh, it's a sad one. I'm just going to say I've caught up a great deal, but not to where I really want to be. Um, so we will keep going next week. I have to put my little tab here. This is the next chapter. I'm just going to tell you I cried through most of it. Um, so we're going to start here next week, and that is what I have for you today. I will then see you next week and pick up where we've left off. Have a good week.